Today we are here with Mr. Michael Franklin, a resident of the neighborhood. Mr. Franklin, can you start off by just telling me a little bit about yourself?
My name is Michael Edward Franklin. I grew up in the 1500 block on Academy at 5083 Academy. When I moved here, to my recollection, I was either 3 or 4 years old when we moved here. My family had lived on Evans, Thomas, and Hyman. One of the reasons I know we moved on Cabinet at 5083 is because my father had a sister, and her husband and their family lived at 5085 Cabinet. And at that time, the white residents that were in the neighborhood basically were moving out or had moved out.
So you were saying you had a lot of the white neighbors move out as you were moving in. How would you say that impacted your upbringing, or do you think it had an impact on the way you grew up?
I don't think so, because in the process of my growing up, the people that I grew up around, they look like me, and a lot of them had similar backgrounds, the families, whatever. A lot of the people had come from the South or had not been in the city of St. Louis maybe that long to begin with. When I say that long, I mean maybe one generation had been there at the most. But most of the people that had really come to St. Louis from the South, whether they had lived in this area or not. My father, he came from Memphis, Tennessee. And he came from Memphis. He had a master's degree and could not get work in Memphis at the time. So he came here to teach. My mother was born in Wilson, Arkansas, and her parents had been sharecroppers. So what had happened was there was an incident in Arkansas where they really were trying to force my grandmother out of the county that they were in. And she came here prior to a little bit before my grandfather, though they were married. And he came a little afterwards, along with my mother, because that was their only child.
So I know that you moved into the neighborhood when you were around 3 or 4 years old. Did you have many friends in the neighborhood?
Oh yeah, I did. Quite a few. And I had a cousin that lived next door. You know, my uncle and I. My cousin was Gladys Farbush. My uncle and I were Anime Farbush, Paul Farbush. I had another cousin that was there because she was here attending school. She was here. She was one of the first black women really to attend Washington University.
Oh wow, so there's a lot of history.
She had come in from Memphis. Well, Washington University was not like it was then. How can I put it? Even though it was a private institution, it was a lot more affordable. And then due to the fact of where we lived, it was easier to get to. Now, friend-wise, the Millers and the Martins lived 2 doors over, going east. And I grew up playing with them all the time. The Finneys lived 2 doors west. And they had a son and a daughter. Well, it wasn't the Finney son and daughter. Their mother, her last name was Brady at the time. And I grew up with him. His name was Kurt. he had a sister named Rochelle, and I can't think of the younger sister's name right now.
So it looks like you had a lot of community and family around you growing up, or
Well, in almost every home, just like our home, there was more than one family that lived there. We had cousins on the third floor until the early or mid 60s. My cousins were older than me, and they had really a baby sister, that was younger than I was as we were growing up. And I had a brother, two sisters. My brother's name was Richard. My sister's name was Joyce and Paula. Let me make sure you know my mother and father's name. My father's name was Bostic Franklin, and my mother's name was Verna Franklin. Now, her mother and father lived with us, and they were the Orrs. Vertus Orr, Matty Orr. Oh, I also had another aunt that lived next door. Her name was Eva Franklin.
so like out of all of your family and friends and community members that you lived with, what were some places you went to feel safe and supported when you were coming up? Or if you needed support or advice, who were people you would go to?
Well, I always felt safe in the neighborhood.
That's good.
To be totally honest with you, I mean, people would have their skirmishes and fights or whatever, but overall we got along very well.
Who is a person that you would say has had the most significant impact on your life, whether it's community?
It's not one person. I guess it was the people that were in the household with me. And that would be my father, mother, grandmother, grandfather. Because as I was growing up, I spent more time during the day with my grandmother than I did anybody, because everybody else was either at school or working.
Would you say that living in Academy changed your family's perspective on life, or how would you say it shaped your perspective?
Well, I don't think it changed their perspective on life. I would change it. It may have broadened their perspective about some things. I guess as a family, the idea was always to be able to provide and take care of family and have the necessities of life, and to try to improve and take care of that which was even around us, because the viewpoint that they had was always, if the people around you are suffering, at some point you're going to suffer.
What are some of the most important lessons you've learned coming up, and what are some lessons that you would want to pass down to the future generations?
There's so many. I mean, it's almost unfair, because that's something I could talk about all day long. And I even see now that I'm still learning lessons all the time. I'm learning a lesson from you by doing this. The most important lessons, I think, I learned, if nothing else, you treat people the way you want to be treated. And to try to make sure those around you, I guess especially those that are closer to you and always in your proximity, none of us should suffer or have problems that's insurmountable.
When is the time that you felt the happiest or the most content when you were growing up in the neighborhood? Or what are some things you...
Well, I think I always felt happiest when really we had family gatherings, and when I say family gatherings, not just the people in the house, but other relatives and friends that would come by. I think those were some of the best high points. Period.
How often have you been able to have these family?
Well, we used to, as I was growing up, we had them on a regular basis because if you went out, you had to spend money, more money than you would if you did things at home. Whereas relatives, anybody, they would bring food, drink, whatever, and you could tell it was an enjoyable time. Now, of course, some things would even get started or break out then, but it was still a way of trying to work out certain things, and then enjoying not having to be under a lot of stress and pressure from a lot of outside sources.
So I've already asked you what advice you have for the young people today. But what is something that you appreciate about these young people today?
That's two questions. I mean, you hit me with a lot at one time. The advice I would give them is this. Make sure that you hold those that are dear to you close. And you make sure that you get involved in some things that are going to make a significant difference for the masses of our people especially. Because what I'm starting to see is right now in this neighborhood where people that didn't look like us had no interest in what was going on, they're not starting to come back because they can see the value in the buildings that was here, and also the value of being nearer to what all goes on and transpires in the city. But for younger people, I would say you gotta avoid things that are going to take you down a road that would, where you can either get put away, meaning incarcerated, or killed. You need to really think hard about that.
Right, and think a little bit more about the choices we're making, and just we need to think more about the choices we make and just how they might impact the person sitting next to us. So I understand. How would you say that you feel like the neighborhood has changed in the past 50 years? Both positive and things that can be worked on. I know you just were speaking on people coming in, seeing the value of the city and wanting to make it into something that is theirs instead of valuing the knowledge of the people who have been living here for years. But what are some things that you have seen? What are some things that you value about the city? What are some things that you love about your neighborhood?
Well, I tell you, as I was growing up, there were a lot more places and businesses right here, not in just Academy-Sherman, but a few of the neighborhoods around us, where you could go get anything you needed. We used to have shoe repair, locksmiths, a hardware store. There were 3 service stations, filling stations, right down the street from me. One was on the corner of Raymond, one was on the corner of Academy and Kings Highway, and there was another right across the street on Kings Highway. So you had everything close. You didn't really have to go far. You had other stores where you could go and get any clothing, that was comparable to anything that they sell now, really made better at that time. And it was cheaper than going where it was a big deal, either downtown or to Wellston to shop. And all of that is I mean, that now is nothing near to that. I can remember some of the drug problems that we had then. They don't nearly come close to what happened in the 80s.
Did you want to speak on
when cocaine became affordable?
Did you want to speak on that, or you rather not? Would you want to speak on that, or would you rather not?
I mean, I can. I mean, growing up, I saw people that had, we saw people that had alcohol problems. And at that time, they didn't necessarily have programs. The programs started getting brought in later down the road for alcohol, more or less. And you had people, especially during Vietnam, where you started having more and more people that got addicted to heroin. Okay, and with the heroin, I guess one of the alternatives was to deal with methadone. And I would see people go back and forth with that. But their heroin didn't make it as violent or as crazy as the cocaine did that came about in the 80s. And I guess those that wanted to make money made sure they got involved in it.
Were
you can see it just tear families apart.
Did you know anyone who was directly impacted by?
Oh, I've had family members that have had problems. So, yes.
I know the 80s were a tough time when it came to drug addiction, just drug being in the street. Prior to that, we had issues that just kind of came as a result of the Great Depression, the war, and a lot of things that just kind of made it seem like, or tried to paint this narrative that we as Black people are powerless and we're unable to take care of ourselves. However, every day, we push back on that narrative, right? Even being in spaces like this, in the garden, where we're growing our own food, educating our own children, and just providing an example of what we want our future generations to embody and what we want our future generations, what values we want them to hold on to. How would you say, despite everything that has happened in our neighborhood, or in the neighborhood, and everything that has gone on, how do you think we have been able to build our power back, or how do you think we've been able to continue to thrive even despite all these negative influences trying to just get in the way of success?
Okay, not trying to be funny or say anything that's out the way, and I guess I'm trying to make sure I keep it simplified. I'm not gonna try to use big words. I think the positive things that come about, just like with the negative, it comes from a hustle type mentality. And when I say hustle, I guess I first learned the word hustle dealing with sports. Okay, but then I've seen what hustle means in day-to-day street life, which almost means you do whatever you need to do to survive day to day. And when I say that means you could wind up doing a lot of negativity without naming things. Okay, and I think you've always got to have a hustle mentality towards wanting to try to build and extend humaneness, at least within our neighborhoods. We had to be able to do that, and I know it's very difficult because we don't have access to the same resources as a lot of other people, and we know that's done by design. So,
I guess
how you navigate yourself around it becomes a hustle. You have to use that kind of street mentality hustle to get the resources that these other people have that we have no access to. That's where you apply that, in my opinion. Now, the other hustle that has to be that we hustle together as a team, like you would in sports. So, and that's why, like I said, I'm trying to keep it without trying to expound on it, make a big deal out of it. I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can.
I get what you're saying. I definitely feel like there's a balance, right? We definitely, as members of our community, I feel like we have an obligation to reach out and touch one another, but also at the same time, we have to be safe and make sure that we're protecting ourselves and, looking out for our families and our children. You just kind of have to, hustle as in keep your eyes on what you want to accomplish, what your goals are, and what your purpose is. But then at the same time, you also kind of got to keep an eye out for things that might not serve you, might not be beneficial, or might hurt you.
I agree. I couldn't have said it any better. I hope, and if you hear this, I hope you don't take it upon me. You can't see the people in my family that was really significant in what got done or what's been done. I know how they tried to hold on to living in that block that I grew up in, because they had a block unit, and we would even go to the church down the street where they would let us in. At one time, you could swim in there, and they had a gymnasium, and they let the people that lived in the neighborhood use it. Okay, along with that, as time went on, they started renting out skates, and people would go up there and skate. But we're so far from that now, and so many of the churches have been closed down, which were some of the major institutions. Like I say, the resources, as people, we're always struggling to have the resources just to make it day to day. And if you get a little bit beyond that, I think we always have to understand we have to put back some kind of way. Like this garden here is significant because that shows where it's not a house here anymore where families live, but it's still something in the community of significance.
Right,
where you still have something growing that is useful, that provides for you. And I want to make sure I didn't leave out some of these families. I know they impacted me. I have two brothers, Warrens, Ransom Warren, Charlie Warren, Morris Warren, Wayne Warren, Gregory Warren, Skip Warren, their sister Debbie, the Millers, Ernell, Wynn, and their sister Regina. They live right near me. The Tates. And I mean, it's hard to name them all by name because there were so many of us. There were so many of us that lived here. And, we look now, I guess, because we still trying to get together on Academy, and we look around and it's almost like very few that were there, but very few still around.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the Browns, the Hawks, man.
So I guess one last question I have, unless you have any more questions. So I know that, especially you being older, at least an older than me, and just you having so much experience, and I've asked a lot of questions about people who have had influences on you. And I understand that some of these people may no longer be here with us. What are some ways that you honor the people who came before you, even if they are not physically here anymore?
I think the way I try to honor them now is my struggle to still stay here and to make sure. Well, I don't plan on going anywhere. Even with that, I might lose some folks out of my household. I mean, it hadn't happened so far, but my way of honoring them is to try to stay here and I guess keep a hold to what I've known. Now, for me to try to give a history of everything would almost be wrong because all these other families to me have been really significant in everything that has gone on right around here. And I regret the fact that the whole story can't be told by all the families that have lived here. And when I say that, I mean we're talking about numerous families. And when I say numerous families, I mean relatives that stayed, that was part of the family, the whole bit, And I think it's too easily forgotten. And I'm just talking about some of the people on my block. I mean, I had friends that stayed on Vernon, Cates, Maple. I would hope that the people that are here that are really serious about community, that we all find ways to try to work on looking out not only for one another in a lot of ways, but to try to preserve what's here and what we may have. I know even though we had to do it on a house-to-house individual basis, but to be willing to help and aid with keeping what little we may have.